A study a few years ago found that people avoided shame more than any other emotion, worrying more about their reputation than their conscience. It's a topic that's not very often discussed, but today we're taking the lid off of it with comedian, author, and pastor Steve Geyer. Welcome.
Good morning.
People thought we brought you on to do comedy, but surprise,
Yeah.
we're going to talk about something really deep.
Well, this early in the morning, comedy could be dangerous. So, still waking up.
Well, we don't want to go there. So this topic of shame, first of all, I want to say thanks for talking about it, because I think it's not an easy, it's shame is telling you, don't talk about me, basically, right? And you decided to be brave. Thank you for that. How do we recognize what shame is? You talk about this feeling that we get in the pit of our stomach. How do you recognize it?
Well, it's anything that makes you want to hide or anything that makes you want to cover up. And one of the things that in our culture is, it's a common phrase, shame on you, shame on you. And when I was doing stand-up and then as a pastor and then doing stand-up again, people come up and will tell me anything. And as a pastor, sometimes they're a little bit more, guarded because I see them every Sunday. But as a comic, for whatever reason, people would come and share their stories with me because I'm leaving now. I'm leaving town and their secret's safe. And it was always something that they were ashamed of, something they wanted to hide, and something they couldn't tell anybody. And that's how it would start out. I've never been able to tell anybody this, but I can tell you. And the whisper, the secrecy. So I was fascinated with it, and then I started realizing, wait a minute, I carry this too. So I started looking, and my research led me to try to find an example of good shame in the Bible, and it does not exist.
And you actually, so you realized that you've been dealing with this your whole life.
Whole life.
And yet you chose a career, okay, a stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
Basically within 10 seconds you're getting feedback and it's not always positive.
Right, and it's dangerous, but my need for acceptance outweighed my fear of rejection, which was interesting. It's an interesting, very interesting juxtaposition of being willing to go out completely unarmed in front of, an audience who is, when comics talk, we talk about, hey, I killed him tonight. Well, that's what you do to an enemy, right? But the vernacular, like, if you do really well, I killed him, but if you don't do well, I bombed, right? So there's all this kind of imagery that's this kind of combative thing that you have with an audience. Because unlike a singer, like when a singer sings and all of a sudden they're funny, it's like, oh, added bonus, they're hilarious. But when a comic goes out, it's like,
make me laugh.
You better be funny. And so,
thankfully you
right.
are.
So, well, yeah, thank you. But what happened is I had to kind of dig deep into me and go, wow, my need for approval outweighed my fear of rejection.
And the crazy thing about shame is that it kind of convinces you to hide. So you
Sure.
hide whatever it is you're ashamed of.
Sure.
And then it works really hard to actually expose you. So it's this crazy cycle that's going on. We see it with the Me Too movement or anything where people are being exposed in the media, for example.
Yeah.
It's the thing that they've most tried to hide.
Well, it's very sticky too. It's like if I'm ashamed of something or if I'm shamed, it's real easy to shame you and I don't even realize I'm doing it, but I'm operating out of what I know. I'm operating about how I feel. And now this whole thing where it's like the public shame that's going on, like shame, what's interesting, there's kind of a corollary between internet shaming, like Twitter shaming. There are these people that are anonymously typing out stuff that they would never say to your face. Never say it to your face. And shame's shadowy like that. Shame's very shadowy. It masks itself as constructive criticism, or it masks itself as one of the biggest masks is sarcasm. When people are sarcastic, I do a whole chapter on that, which is interesting.
It's a convicting chapter. I can't.
Yeah,
so we're
it's
talking
hard.
chapter. This is from your book, Shameless, which is amazing. I was literally so shamed, sitting at my desk at work, bawling my eyes out, going, I'm not crying. I'm not crying at my desk. So powerful. And that whole thing on sarcasm, because sometimes we're trying to address something that we're being not passive aggressive, but maybe that is the right word, that you don't want to tell somebody, so you're kind of teasing them about it because you're trying to tell them, really, Steve, next time you need to be on time or bring your card so you're not locked out of the building, for example. Which you didn't have one, so I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but no, that's what people do. And then they use sarcasm and shame and all this stuff to publicly shame someone, but they would never say it to their face. And And to really love somebody is to say, it's like a doctor's Hippocratic oath. I'm going to hurt you, but I'm not going to harm you. I need to hurt your feelings because there's something that's going on in your life that is actually harming you. So I'm going to hurt you, but I'm not going to harm you. And what I did with the book was I try to write it in that vein of what I love about the feedback that I've gotten is from people who say, I feel like you're talking to me. And that's the style it's written. It was written as a conversation because I bring up the objection and then I answer the questions that that I think people are asking. Because while I'm writing the book, I'm thinking about actually sitting down, talking with somebody and having a conversation to help them discover, do I have shame in me? And one of my favorite moments was a friend of mine I had sent the book to, and I said, hey, I would value your opinion on this. And I said, and I told him what the title was, and he said, well, I don't deal with any of that stuff. Oh, okay, great. So he's reading it, and he's got like maybe 2 or 3 chapters, and he goes, oh, this is really good, I like your writing style, but I don't have any problems with this, blah, blah, blah. 2 days later, I get a phone call. I started laughing. He goes, okay, man. And it was so funny because he didn't realize how shame was impacting him, but what he really got was how the story of in the book where I think you may have read that part where there's this guy who's just being really cruel, and I challenged him on it. And his wife, he got really mad and everything, and he's like, rah, 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 and his wife just started crying and said, he thought he mistook her crying because I had called somebody out, and it was mean. She goes, no, it's true. And, so shame is this, again, nowhere in the scriptures is it a good thing. Isaiah 58 says, you always forget the shame of your youth. Shame is never a good thing. Conviction is a wonderful thing. Revelation is a wonderful thing. But shame, why did Adam and Eve hide? Because they were ashamed and they hid. It's the first response.
And you talk about that difference between healthy sorrow. So when we do something to hurt someone or something wrong, we should feel bad about it and we should make restitution or make it right. But shame lives on with us, and like you're not okay. There's something wrong with you. How do we start to overcome that?
For those who are watching that aren't believers or have yet to see what the scriptures say, my solution is, if I've got the right antidote for your problem, but I'm afraid to hurt your feelings or offend you with it, that's not going to help you, is it? So I'm going to risk by saying, find out what the scriptures say about you and me. Go to the Word. Find out. There are 3 voices. There's the voice of the enemy, there's the voice of God, and the voice in our own head. And our own head will always find the worst thing about us, and the enemy will always agree with it. But God goes, no. It's the difference between listening to your left ear and your right ear. You're horrible. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. You're a loser. I love you without measure. You are never going to amount to anything, for I know the plans I have for you, right? And so it's the difference of shutting off that one ear to go, you know what? I'm going to learn to become deaf in this ear so that I can hear better in this ear. And so my to Christian, non-Christian, is find what the scriptures say about you, and whether you're a believer or not, if you will read it and just apply it to yourself, you will find how amazingly comforting it is, even if you don't believe that it's inspired, but you'll be amazed at how comforting it is because the words are true.
Now, as a person of faith, you walked for many years with this, and I think, if people really knew what we're talking about, if they were really honest with themselves, everybody has shame to a degree.
Yeah.
But you've really come into a new place of freedom. So was it reading those scriptures and over? Like, what was it for you? Was it recognizing it?
It was recognizing it and owning it, and realizing that not only, and having to address some things that I didn't want to go there. For a long time, I was one of those people that would say, I don't cry, and I didn't. And it was like, because I'm afraid if I start crying, I may never stop. Well, there's fear there, and there's shame, because there's places that in my past that I didn't want to go to, but they were always tripping me up in my present. So what happened in my past is affecting my present, and it's going to show up in my future. So I've got to deal with it. And so I started really through conversations with other people, helping them, and then just finding out what the scripture says about shame, and then owning it, and then having to it's the, what is it? What is it? 1 Corinthians 5:10, where it says, "We're destroying speculations and every lofty thing that raises itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take every thought captive to make it obedient to Christ." And I would quote that verse about 100 times a minute, because I had to retrain. I needed to be transformed by the renewing of my mind. And if I'm going to be transformed by the renewing of my mind, I'd like to have something that's positive about me, that says that yes, I am flawed, and yes, I'm a sinner, but I'm not a waste of space.
So good. There's so much more to learn from this awesome, awesome book. I can't recommend it enough. Shameless with Steve Geyer. Make sure you get your copy. Amazon, I'm assuming, probably.
Sure. Amazon, yeah.
Google it. You
Sure.
can get it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming with us today. There's so much more we could talk about. We're out of time.
No worries. I'll come back if they unlock the door.
Okay, that's a deal. Okay. Let's go over to Sean.